Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our forum today. First of all, I would like to thank all of the audience in front of me. Thank you very much for attending the forum for today. So our issue for this morning is, are humans to be blamed for climate change? First, let me introduce to all of you our panels for today. Our first panelist is Nur Maisara Sofia. Second is Nurul Najiha. Third is Lisa Batrisha. And our final panelist, Nurul Fitra. I hope all of you are in the pink of health. With me, Muhammad Natullah, as your chairperson. Before we start our forum in detail, let me explain about our topic today. So, climate change refers to long-term shifts in temperature and weather patterns. These shifts may be natural, such as through variations in the solar cycle. But since the 1800s, human activities have been the main driver of climate change, primarily due to burning fossil fuels like coal, oil and gas. Burning fossil fuel generates greenhouse gas emissions that acts like a blanket wrapped around the earth, trapping the sun's heat and raising temperatures. Examples of greenhouse gas emissions that are causing climate change include carbon dioxide and methane. Without wasting time, let's hear the opinion on our title from the first invited panel, Maisara.
Thanks, Mr. Moderator. My view on this topic is that rich countries are responsible for planet warming greenhouse gases released from fossil fuels. Based on the article I have read from the New York Times, the author Nadia Popovic and Brad Plumer indicate a similar point of view. According to the author, 23 rich developed countries are responsible for half of all historical carbon dioxide emission. For example, the United States, Canada, Japan, and much of Western Europe account for just 12% of the global population today, but are responsible for 50% of all the planet warming greenhouse gases released from fossil fuels and industry over the past 170 years. Meanwhile, more than 150 countries are responsible for the other half. The research shows that the United States is the highest of the countries contributing to this climate change with 24.6%, followed by Germany 5.5%, United Kingdom 4.4%, Japan 3.9%, and France 2.3%. Developing countries argue that rich countries are responsible for most of today's climate change impacts because they started emitting carbon much earlier than the rest of the world. Other than that, these rich countries are need to be responsible for the vulnerable and poor countries because they had many lots of people losing their life, hence losing their future, which is climate change bring many bad effects to the humans. That's all. I pass back to our moderator. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Maisara. From your explanation, you agree that humans are to be blamed for climate change. Let's move to Ms. Nurul Najiha. What is your opinion?
Assalamualaikum and a very good morning I bid to all of you. Thank you for inviting me, and I am glad to be here as one of the panelists for our forum today. So based on today's topic, are human is to be blamed for climate change? My view on this topic is that humans' action is contributing to the climate change. First, we can see that humans' population are increasing every day. Global human population growth amounts to around 83 million annually, or 1.1% per year. The global population has grown from 1 billion in the 80s to 7.9 billion in 2020. Population distribution and density are also relevant to environmental impact, but the relationship are more complicated. The size of the human population has grown exponentially over the last 100 years. Therefore, the higher level of population, the higher level of consumption by humans. These current levels of human consumption, in combination with growing population, contributes to the climate change. Based on the article that I have studied, which is Human Behavioral Contributions to Climate Change, the author indicates that humans' consumption and growing population are having a significant negative impact on the natural environment and are contributing to climate change. Increases in population, number of households, and housing size potentially impact climate change not just through direct and indirect energy use, but also through deforestation and biodiversity more generally. However, this problem can be solved through stabilizing or reducing population size, which can be an important element of climate change mitigation. Reducing the number of households can also be critical because of the link to population size and efficiency. That's all. I pass back to our moderator. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Najiha, for your point of view. There is no doubt that the human population is increasing each day. We never thought that the increase in population could be one of the factors for climate change. Now, let's move on to the next panel, Lisa.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Assalamualaikum and good morning to all of you that is present today. Based on today's topics that is given, I agree that humans are to be blamed for the climate change. As my view on this topic is that the transportation sector certainly brings impact to climate change. Transportation is like a need in daily life that is essential to be used by most of the humans. The transportation sector is one of the largest contributors to anthropogenic US greenhouse gas emissions. According to the inventory of US greenhouse gas emissions and since 1990 until 2019, the transportation account for the largest portion at 29% of total US greenhouse gas emissions in 2019. Car, trucks, commercial aircraft, and railroads, among other sources, all contribute to transportation and use sector emissions. Transportation relies heavily on petroleum, and passenger car and light-duty trucks such as sport vehicle, pickup trucks, and minivans contribute half of the carbon dioxide emissions from the US transportation sector. Burning 1 gallon of gasoline creates about 20 pounds of carbon dioxide, which means the average vehicle creates roughly 6 to 9 tons of carbon dioxide each year. According to the data from the International Energy Agency from year 2018, road travel accounts for 3/4 of transport emissions, where most of these come from passenger vehicles such as car and bus, which contribute 45.1% and the other 29.4% comes from trucks carrying freight. Since the entire transportation sector accounts for 21% of total emissions and road transport accounts for 3/4 of transport emissions, road transport accounts for 15% of carbon dioxide emissions. Although aircraft of aviation often gets the most attention in discussion on action against climate change, it accounts for only 11.6% of transport emissions. It emits just under 1 billion tons of carbon dioxide each year, around 2.5% of total global emissions. The international shipping contributes a similar amount at 10.6%. Then, rail travel and freight also emits very little, with only 1% of transport emissions, and other transport, which is mainly the movement of materials such as water, oil, gas via pipelines, is responsible for 2.2% only. This is very worrying, as riding a transportation only can contribute to the climate crisis. And that's all. I pass back to our moderator. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Lisa, for your point of view. From the explanation, you agree that humans are to be blamed for climate change. as there is a certainty that the transportation sector by humans affect climate change. Now let's move on to the next panel, Ms. Fitrah.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Moderator, but I have to disagree on this topic because I think that humans are not the ones who is to be blamed for this climate change. Okay, because as you already know, climate change has worsened since 1800s. Okay, and it's because of the global warming. Okay, so it means that the planet has warmed since 1800s. Okay, but specifically, okay, it is because of human activity, but specifically the climate change happened because of the massive use of fossil fuels, because of the power of our global, of our social and economic, and many more. Okay, so we see that there is a former executive of the oil and gas establishment, and he also have PhD in astrophysics from the University of Oxford, which is Dr. Baki. He also said that human behavior would not give impact to the climate change. Okay, and the vast sums spent by the government to promote renewable energy to cut the greenhouse gas emission are actually a waste. Okay, we see it's actually a waste. Dr. Baki says that the carbon dioxide has a little impact or will not give impact at all to the climate change. So, however, not all scientists agree with his statement, with his theory. Okay, so for example, why the scientists did not agree with his theory? Because they say that Dr. Baki's theory didn't have a satisfactory explanation. Okay, but we see here, I can give you an example. So for example, glacial cycles, okay, that were triggered by periodic variation in Earth orbit, which take place over 1,000 years and change how solar get distributed around the globe. Okay, you see, and across all over the season. Okay, so you can see one of the example here, where it is not human to be blamed for the climate change. So I totally do not agree with this, that humans are the ones to be blamed for climate change. So I'm passing back our discussion to our Mr. Moderator. Thank you.
Wow, I can see that our discussion seems to be getting heated up now. So do you guys acknowledge what is being mentioned by Miss Maisara, Miss Najiha, Miss Lisa, and Miss Fitrah?
When discussing about humans' action contributes to climate change, since 1750, human activities have had a global warming effect on the earth. That is why humans are the main agents of climate change. Humans' daily activities has induced climate change, which can cause global warming. It is because human activities have led to the release of carbon dioxide and other heat-trapping greenhouse gases in sufficient quantities to change the composition of the atmosphere, resulting in an accumulation of heat in the Earth system, commonly referred to as global warming. According to the author of How Do Human Activities Contribute to Climate Change and How Do They Compare with Natural Influences, human activities result in emissions of 4 principal greenhouse gases: carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, and the halocarbons, which is a group of gases containing fluorine, chlorine, and bromine. These gases accumulate in the atmosphere, causing concentration to increase with time. Significant increases in all these gases have occurred in the industrial era. Human activities have increased ozone through the release of gases such as carbon monoxide, hydrocarbons, and nitrogen oxide, which chemically react to produce ozone. Halocarbons released by human activities destroy ozone in the stratosphere and have caused the ozone hole over Antarctica. It is very worrying knowing that from just doing our daily activities, it can contribute to climate crisis. That's all from me. Thank you.
It is indeed very worrying as daily activities are a norm and routine in our life. Next, let's listen to the next panel, Miss Lisa, of what she thinks as she agrees on this topic.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I agree with both opinion of Ms. Najiha that human action contribute to climate change. Therefore, I would like to add a last point of view on why I agree that humans are to be blamed for climate change. The point is, food waste by humans contribute to climate change. This is because the food waste significantly increase the amount of greenhouse gases and also global warming. Food waste is a major source of greenhouse gases, mostly in the form of methane, a pollutant at least 25 times more potent than carbon dioxide. As such, the United Nations warns that food waste alone causes 10% of greenhouse gases. According to an assessment by the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, 6.7% of all global greenhouse gases come from food waste, where if food waste was a country, it will be the third highest emitter of greenhouse gases after the US and China. Globally, roughly half of the food waste is created before the food leaves the farm, while the other half happens during processing, distribution, and consumption. An analysis of food waste in the US by ReFed found that nearly 85% of waste occurs in stores, restaurants, and homes. In 2018, the Food and Agriculture Organization revealed that food waste in the United States, Europe, China, Japan, and Australia occurs above all during distribution and in the consumer refrigerator. The UN estimates that 1.3 billion tons of a year of food, which is 1/3 of world production, ends up as rubbish before it even gets to the table. Furthermore, 10.5% of humanity is suffering from malnutrition, 26% are obese, and the greenhouse gases from the food industry account for 25 to 30% of the total emissions that have led to today's climate crisis. This data come from the latest report from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which estimate that loss and waste of food cause between 8 and 10% of the emissions of the gases responsible for global warming in the period of 2010 until 2016. That's it for me.
Thank you, Miss Lisa, for your explanation. It can be seen that you totally agree that humans are to blame for climate change. Let's see what Miss Fitra can say about her point of view on this topic.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Okay, now I would like to change my perspective because I think that I would like to agree with them, with Ms. Najiha, Ms. Lisa, and Ms. Maisara about this, that humans are the ones to be blamed for this climate change. Okay, why I say that? Because as mentioned by Ms. Najiha, global warming has worsened since 1750. And yes, it is because the contribution of human activity itself. Okay, it is natural for climate to change, but it is humans' activities that make it more worse. Okay, so the record itself has shown that today's climate change has been at a faster rate than before, and it cannot be because of the nature alone. Okay, it must be because of the human activities. Okay, the contribution of ourselves. Okay, so as NASA mentioned, these natural causes are still play today, but their influence is too small, okay, or they occur too slowly to explain the rapid warming seen in these decades. Okay, So the lead of this climate change is the greenhouse gas emission. We all know that greenhouse gases have an important role where it keeps the earth warm. But as mentioned earlier by Ms. Najiha and Ms. Lisa, that these gases in our atmosphere has increased. Okay, so we see that the burning of fossil fuels like coal, oil, gas for electricity, heat, and transportation is the primary cause of human-generated emission. And the second major cause is deforestation, which is release created carbon into the atmosphere. Okay, so the logging, clear cutting, fires, and any other form of deforestation has released carbon dioxide on average of 8.1 billion metric tons per year. So it's a huge number, right? So other than that, fertilizer use, livestock production, and certain industrial processes that release fluorinated gases also contribute to air pollution. Okay, so according to the World Economic Forum's Global Risk Report 2021, failure to mitigate and adapt to this climate change is the most impactful risk facing communities worldwide. Okay, it's really big about this. As we all know, climate change might transform the global ecosystem. Thus, it affects everything from the place we live, to the water we drink, to the food we eat, and to the air that we breathe. So that's all from me. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Miss Fitra, Miss Maisara. Is there anything you want to add up from this discussion?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. From the opinion that have been presented from Ms. Najiha, Lisa, and Fitra, I do agree with them. But I have another opinion, which is we need to stop blaming each other, or otherwise this problem could not be overcome. The real culprits of this climate emergency have been eclipsed by individual guilt and blame. If we invested this energy we currently have in challenging each other's green credentials into calling out how government and businesses have derailed environmental action, instead we might be further ahead. A recent report found 134 countries have commitments to reduce emissions over the next decade that are insufficient for limiting global warming to well below 2 Celsius, as outlined in the International Paris Agreement on Climate Change. Building the movements to challenge and ultimately change the situation will be profound. Acting alone simply is not an option. Instead of obsessing over our individual carbon footprint, we need to realize our collective power. The COVID-19 pandemic has illustrated this beautifully. In many places, people have surprised their own governments by overwhelmingly obeying lockdown, restrictions, and supporting their extension. So, what example can we take from the COVID-19 pandemic is we need to deal with this problem together instead of blaming each other. Blaming each other will not bring this problem to a conclusion, but instead worsen it. Lastly, I do believe many of us as humans have much in contributing the effort to make this climate change decrease, even though it is little, but everyone's efforts can make this problem come to a close. That's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you to all of our panelists today. Finally, we have come to an end of our forum where we have shared a lot of knowledge which we don't even know or thought about before. Well, from what our panelists shared just now, all of them agree that humans are to be blamed for climate change. But in the end, we still need to collaborate to overcome this problem together. Before we end our forum today, I would like to open up a few moments for the Q&A section. I will ask the question on behalf of the audience. So here are the questions from Ms. Najwa. The question is, what things that we can do to prevent climate change?
Thank you, Ms. Najwa, for the question. Whether we realize or not, climate change has already begun to impact our planet in more ways we can think of. There are always things that we can do to prevent and fight against climate change, especially in our norms or routines such as recycling. Recycling is a cost-effective and eco-friendly process that eliminates waste and doesn't emit greenhouse gases into the environment. However, production of goods that we use on a regular basis are by factories which emits a large amount of greenhouse gases. Therefore, be sure to collect discarded papers, glass, plastic and electronics and send it for recycling to prevent waste that can contribute to climate change. Thank you.
Other than that, we also can educate ourselves and others. The importance of educating others about climate change cannot be overstated in our modern society. There are many platforms for us to utilize that can allow us to spread our message easily. Whether you use word of mouth or social media, there are always ways to educate others on what climate change is doing to our planet. You can help protect the planet by educating others about the dangers of climate change and how to act against it.
Thank you for the question, and it's a good question. Okay, from my perspective, I would like to say that we cannot prevent climate change. Okay, but what we can do is we lessen the causes of climate change to the world. Okay, because climate change happen naturally, right? Okay, so what we can do is actually we are learning from our mistake. So what we can do is we should be more conservative with the energy usage. It starts from home, where you use less energy, cutting your carbon footprint and your energy bills. Okay, make sure that you turn off the lights when you don't use it, and you unplug your devices when you don't want to use them. And simple changes like that can really mean a lot to lessen the effect climate change. Okay, that's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Lisa, Maisara, and Fitra for the answer. That's all for today. I will end our forum discussion with thanks to all the panelists and the audience. Thank you for all your thoughts and opinions through these discussion sessions. Assalamualaikum.